Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Oluwasegun Faloye, and I am from the Tongues Project. You're welcome on board as we begin our video exploration of the gift of tongue. But we have been debating this for centuries. The debate on the nature of tongue began precisely in the early 20th century, and though there have been some groundwork in the late 19th century, or we can trace it back to 18th century, where some revisionists begin to revise the miraculous in the scripture just to argue it away. And here we are today still debating uh, the gift of tongue, the nature, the purpose it serves, and the function of that gift in the church. And over time, all parties on both sides have been speaking above each other. We have not been communicating because many of us don't understand this subject as we thought we do, and many of us uh, don't quite have enough resources to back our claims and our thoughts. So, what is the gift of tongue about? The first thing is to make a correction about our starting point, right? I asked, what is the gift of tongue? That is not the first question to ask because we need to know, ascertain for a fact what the nature of tongue is before we begin to discuss it in relation to it being a gift. So, what is tongue? That is the starting point. And if we miss this, we can't argue correctly the gift of tongue. We can't defend it, we can't defend it accurately, and we can't speak against it accurately either because we have missed the foundation. The foundation is what is tongue. And the dictionaries of the Bible, I mean, the Bible's dictionaries, have it annotated, clearly expressed and described as human language. And this is not far fetched, this is from the pages of the scripture itself. The tongue means human language. It also means our literal tongue, the organ that is responsible for tasting and speech. And also, it represents a group of people identified by a unique language. Those are the three contexts in which the Bible uses tongue. And let me also state that the word tongue was an old English of which we have the contemporary to mean language. Tongue was the English, in the English word they had when the Protestant fathers were translating the Bible into English from Latin or Greek, depending on the manuscript they had. So when they saw lingua, for example, which is the Latin language, the Latin word for language, uh, the English equivalent they had was tongue. And that was why in 1611, when the King James Version was released, it was released as tongue. The Tyndale Bible previously used the same. The Geneva Bible also had uh, translated a glossa to mean tongue, because that is the English they had. Geneva Bible was not really, I'm not sure the first edition was English, but when it was being translated to King James Version, they put tongue because that is the English word they had. Now, the word we have today in contemporary English is language. So the question may be, why is the word still retained in the modern translation or the modern English translation? This will be for the translators themselves to answer. But I think that the reason is because they are trying to just, as much as possible, to stay closer to the earlier tradition of translation. So they retain some words, right? To still continue with the meaning, not to confuse or create unnecessary debate of maybe the word has changed or something, but it still means the same. So any translation you have, either you have it in you have the word tongue or you have the word language, is the same thing. They're not talking about similar thing, talking about the same exact phenomenon, which is language. And how do they arrive at this? We see this right on the pages of the scripture from Genesis. Genesis 11 made it clear that the whole world had one unified language. We heard one spoke the same words. And something happened. People, in their wisdom, try to go against the covenantal blessing that God has pronounced on humanity. He gave Adam a blessing, right, to be fruitful and multiply. He repeated the same blessing to Noah after the flood. But these people came together and said, let's not disperse. Let's build a tower which roof reach heaven, and let's make name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed, which is against the blessing that God has pronounced. And that blessing was made in covenant with humanity. And because God is a covenant keeper, that blessing must hold. So God, in His wisdom, could have just sent one angel to destroy them in the wake of their rebellion, or could just send fire like the days of Elijah. But no, what He did was to disperse them by splitting one unified language into multiple languages, and that is how we got um, multiple languages, multiple clans and nations, multiple civilizations, multiple tradition and culture, because one unified language was dispersed, splitted into pieces, and the people could not understand each other again. We'll go into this in details, but this is just an introduction. And in the parts of introduction is to define correctly, accurately, what tongue means. Tongue means human language. And if you go through the pages of the scripture, you will see that. The Hebrew word for it is Saphah. Saphah. That is the spelling, right? And it means language, it means lips, it means boundary, it connotes seashore, right? It connotes, I've said it, boundaries, and some other things that depicts having a set of limitation or a confine. And we see language in that true sense because language limits a people to a unique domain. That is a peculiarity. An Igbo person is restricted within the freedom of his language. A Yoruba person like me is restricted within the freedom of my language. So if I want to cross border or learn the ways of the Igbos, I must be able to speak their language for me to be able to interpret their culture and tradition, and so domesticate it to myself, in order for me to have a cross language conversation with them. Without that, there can't be language, and that was why the project was abandoned at Babel, because the elements, the rudiment elements for any kind of growth has been altered, which is language. If language is not established, nothing else grows. Everything is a dead desert, if there's a word for that. So we see that first, language was unified, language was purposeful, language was intelligible. People were able to listen and hear what they were saying. Language was God centered. And it is because of this that we're able to pass through the pages of the Bible and reach a point in time where it becomes a gift. But we can't understand fully its uniqueness as a gift if we don't understand it in its natural estate, in its nature. So the nature of it is human language. It's human. It's given to human. And we begin to see this on the pages of the scripture. So when we get to the New Testament, the language is different. Hebrew, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and possibly, yes, Hebrew. I think Greek and Aramaic was close neighbors. All right, but albeit Greek was language, the predominant language of the New Testament. And so we have the word glossa all through the pages of the New Testament. But they mean the same thing, exactly the same thing with what we have in the Old Testament. Human lips, right? That is responsible for taste and speech, because without your physical tongue, you can't not speak and you cannot taste. It also means language through which you are able to communicate or express your thoughts. And also means a unique people identified by a unique language. So Igbo as a language identifies a people as Igbo. French as a language identifies a people as French. German as a language identified a group of people as German. That is the nature of what we have in the scripture. That is tongue. It means human language. And we begin to see that in their uniqueness, each language has its own peculiarity, but they share the same thing. They are intelligible, they are communicable, they are understandable, they are translatable. You cannot correctly understand what a German is saying if you are unable to translate that words he is speaking in German to yourself as an Englishman or as a Yoruba man. There cannot be communication. So if I want to have a communication with my neighbors, there has to be an established language that is understandable, right, between myself and the person, that is translatable, that is intelligible. Otherwise, there cannot be communication. And that is important thing for us to note. The word we have in Hebrew text is called Saphah, which means human language in this context. And the same thing we have in another word in Greek, which calls glossa, which means tongue or human language. In Latin, we have it as lingua, and that is where English derives its own construct. The derivative language, I suppose, the derivative of the transliteration that we have in Latin, which is lingua. So it's not an accident when you hear the word mother tongue. It means your native language, right? That is precisely what tongue means, language.